Waterfall, the CCW podcast.
Hello and welcome to Waterfall. It's the water saving podcast brought to you by CCW. That's the Consumer Council for Water. Waterfall is all about saving water, saving money, protecting the environment and combating climate change. I'm Mike. I'm here with producer Tom. Hello, Tom.
Hi, Mike. Hi, everyone. Great to be back for another edition of Waterfall. We do so much good with this podcast, Mike, and we have so much fun, and it feels like we shouldn't be working, really, but we are.
Well, we've got a good episode lined up where we're speaking to Tessa from the Rivers Trust, and she's going to be telling us all about rewiggling of rivers, de-wiggling, in fact, and it's fascinating stuff. And what's the connection between that and drought resilience? So some fascinating stuff coming up. Now, we did have some big exciting news to announce, but Karen's not with us, so we're going to have to trail this for a future episode because Karen, after much prevaricating and obfuscating, has actually got her water meter fitted. So we've got some big news to announce the next time we can get hold of Karen to come on to Waterfall, which is what I was hoping we were going to talk about today, but there's no Karen. Before we get into Tessa and all the great stuff from the Rivers Trust, obviously you can get in touch with the show.
Waterfall, you can get us at podcast at ccwater.org.uk. The spirit of Karen is coming through me right now.
That's very good. And we've got the socials as well, don't we?
Yes. Just search Waterfall Podcast on your Instagram, on your Twitter, etc., and you'll find lots of behind the scenes goodies there.
It's worth looking at just to see a wider picture of the wonderful world of Waterfall. So, Tom, I do have a question for you, though. I was working on the understanding that Karen was interviewing Tessa from the Rivers Trust. And when I listened to it, what I realised was you were interviewing Tessa and Karen was just basically chipping in randomly. So my question for you is that you've upgraded yourself from producer to interviewer. And secondly, what did you do to Karen? Was she gagged in the corner?
No, we worked this out before. There was a power vacuum, Mike. Without you and Kath there, I just felt like I had to step up. But Karen was the expert. Karen was who we determined all the questions with. And it was a great chat with Tessa as well. She was very knowledgeable, and I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. Even though Mike isn't there, I think you guys are going to enjoy it.
Well, in my view, it took a horrible turn for the worst when Tom filled the power vacuum. Is this how we're going to rename our episodes? Like Friends, the one where Tom filled the power vacuum.
The one where Tom betrays Mike's trust. Yeah, it was a one-off, dear listeners. Don't worry, Mike and Kath are going to be leading going forward.
No, it's a good interview, Tom. And I'm just pulling your leg, which would be more fun if Karen was here too, because I'd like to hear her side of this story too. So maybe we can fill in these gaps in future editions. But look, it was great. I've just been listening to the interview, great interview that you've done with Tessa from the Rivers Trust. Some real insights there coming out. So I think we should just bring on the guest.
Enjoying the show? Please consider leaving a 5-star rating on iTunes and Spotify. Okay, so very pleased now to be joined by the Director of Communications and Advocacy at the Rivers Trust, Tessa Wardley. Tessa, welcome to Waterfall.
Hi, thank you for inviting me.
Of course. And can we just start with the basics? Can you just tell us a little about the Rivers Trust and what you do as an organisation, please?
Yep, sure. So the Rivers Trust is a conservation charity. We're around 400 people, river and catchment experts with a wealth of data and evidence at our fingertips. We have a network of 65 member trusts across the UK and Ireland. So we're in every river catchment in England and many catchments in Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland and Ireland as well. And we have a shared vision as an organisation of wild, healthy, natural rivers valued by everyone. We use our expertise and nationwide coverage and our member trusts' local knowledge. We work with farmers, residents and organisations to provide advice and resources for their communities. And we bring together people. We convene people in river catchments. So we bring together the people, the knowledge, the data and the intelligence to help rivers to thrive. And we convene people and we think our rivers are an integral part of our communities, and we're the leading movement to protect them, make sure that we have a better future.
And I wonder what your particular interest in relation to public water supply is then. I mean, obviously there is a direct link between rivers and our water supplies, but perhaps you could expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, sure. So around 2/3 of our public water supply actually comes from rivers. So that's really has quite a big impact potentially on those rivers. It's either abstracted from rivers directly or it's taken from the groundwaters, and both of those can have an impact on the river. They can also, sometimes it comes from reservoirs, and that takes the water from the rivers. Sometimes it just dams effectively a river, but then that'll have an impact on the river downstream where the supply is controlled and comes out at different speeds, different times of day and things like that. So abstraction rates are permitted by the Environment Agency in terms of how much water can be taken out of groundwaters and rivers. And part of the reason for that is to protect the river flows for wildlife. But in many cases, our rivers are actually over abstracted. So I think at the moment, only 14% of our rivers achieve good ecological status. And part of the reason for that is because of flows and the amount of water in the river. So 15% of the rivers that fail to reach good ecological status, it's because of the amount of water that's in there. So, this can be a particular problem for some of our most precious water bodies. So our chalk streams, for example, are very dependent on the water flow that goes into them. England is home to about 85% of the world's chalk streams. These really are precious and unique rivers, and they're ecologically rare internationally, and they're very sensitive to flows. So what's important for those rivers is not only that they have enough flow, but also the timing of the flow. So those peak flows are really important for cleaning the gravels, which is where the fish spawn, but it's also really important to stimulate the migration of the fish. So they'll gather up downstream, but they need a surge of water to encourage them to swim up the river. So all of these things are really important in terms of how much water and the timing of the water that's in our rivers. And with 2/3 of our public water supply coming from rivers, there's big potential for impact.
Tess, I was hoping you could clear something up for me, because I've been confused, because we have the Canal and Rivers Trust and we have the Rivers Trust. Like, where is the line drawn on these elements? Like, apologies if this is an idiotic question here, but I wasn't sure the blend there.
Yeah, no, it's not an idiotic question at all. And, it's something that quite often people get confused about, and I quite often get introduced as Tessa Wardley from the Canal and Rivers Trust, and I have to explain that no, we're not the Canal and Rivers Trust, we're just the Rivers Trust. And we've even had people who wanted to donate money to us inadvertently, giving it to the wrong organisation, and it probably happens the other way around as well. But so the Canal and Rivers Trust is a partially government funded organisation, and they're charged with maintaining the canal and navigable rivers network across England and Wales. So I think there are about 3,200 kilometres of canals and navigable rivers, but we actually have 210,000 kilometres of rivers and streams across the UK and Ireland. And those are the rivers that we're interested in returning to natural conditions. So we're less interested in making sure canals and navigable rivers are accessible to boats and small craft, but more about the wildlife in our broader river network.
I mean, picking up on something that you mentioned earlier about, the sensitivity to particularly the chalk streams to drought conditions, I wonder, what you feel needs to happen to kind of help those rivers, become more drought resilient, if you like.
I mean, there are lots of things that can help rivers become more drought resilient, but a healthy river will be naturally more resilient to drought. So it's really about a case of restoring our rivers to being the most healthy they can be, because healthy rivers wind their way through the landscape. They have pools and riffles, meanders, and they have a nice balance of plants and marginal vegetation. You'll have wetlands and boggy areas and natural barriers in fallen trees and things like that. And that means that the water slows down and is held in the river catchment area. And that means there's plenty of time for that water to percolate through the soil and down into the aquifers. So that water is, one, it's recharging the groundwaters and means that the river flows will stay stronger and there's water there for abstraction if needed. But it also means that water is not rushing through the landscape, causing erosion, loss of soils and potential flooding havoc as well. But the other thing that's important is not just that it's the river. People tend to think of the river very much as the river as a constrained body of water, but actually for healthy rivers you have to have healthy catchments. So our rivers really reflect everything that's going on in the catchment. They really kind of hold up a mirror. And with only 14% of our rivers being in good ecological status, I think that tells us something about the state of the way we're managing our land as well. So actually, the more that we can hold water in the catchments, and the better way that our agricultural land is farmed, and our more rural areas, peatland restoration and things like that, they all help to hold water in the catchments and help the water to seep into the soil rather than rushing off the land into the rivers, taking soils and pollutants with them. So those two things are really important. And I think we don't often talk about that in relation to drought. We often talk about it in relation to pollution and flooding. We don't often talk about it in relation to drought, but actually they're two sides of the same problem, really.
I really liked what you were saying there about healthy rivers winding through the landscape and that whole description. And, on your website, you speak about rewiggling rivers. Now, which is a great term in general, but why were they de-wiggled in the first place? Can you give us a bit of history on that, please?
Yeah, so I think, it's something that's been going on for centuries, essentially. And, our river networks are highly, highly managed for many different reasons, and it's all generally human reasons. But historically, they were often straightened, and it was a misperception that actually that might help flooding. Very often was to get the water out of the catchment as quickly as possible. So they were widened, they were deepened, they were straightened. And, sometimes that was to create more dry land for agriculture. Sometimes it was to create a good flow of water for mills, for textile mills, for grain mills, and now we don't have the need for those kind of industrial needs for fast water flowing. We now have a better understanding that actually our natural wiggly rivers are actually much better. In some cases, they were just straightened to make way for roads, for development. And very often they were concrete lined as well in the process. And you can imagine how all of that is just really bad for wildlife. So you've got no variety in the riverbed. You haven't got anywhere for plants to attach. You've got nowhere for insects and invertebrates to nestle into, a varied riverbed. And that means that the water, when it gets into it, is just hooning down the water course. And, can imagine being a fish there, being swept away with a face full of water. And ultimately the river dies. So, it's rewiggling is quite a major part of improving the situation for our rivers.
And will restoring rivers help in the longer term with balancing this sort of supply-demand gap that we're expecting to see over time?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of debate as to whether it would be sufficient and whether it would be enough to capture enough water to refill the aquifers, and whether that would be enough. And I think there probably has to be a focus on supply and demand. We're very bad in this country in terms of our consumption. There's a lot more that we could be doing. There are examples from Denmark, I think, which is always held up as a bit of an exemplar, as they have managed to get their consumption down to about 110 litres a day, I think, and whereas ours is over 150 litres a day per person. So there's a lot we can do on that side, but definitely, restoring our rivers and our catchments to more natural state to capture that water and hold it in the land it might mean we don't need as many reservoirs as we think we might need. We don't necessarily need to lose that agricultural and land to reservoirs. I think there's various debates. I've seen evidence that suggests that would be sufficient. I've seen other evidence that suggests we would still need other factors and measures put in place, but it would certainly help.
I mean, this is what Waterfall has been trying to encourage people to think about, just making those small changes to the way they use water at home and at work, because I think we all recognise that perhaps, the time is coming where we can't take water for granted as we have done up until now.
Yeah, and it seems to be one of those discussions that people don't really like to have too much in, within the sort of, I mean, even broader within the environmental world. I was talking to a professor of climate science, and he was saying, all of the projections rely on us curbing demand as well as improving supply. So for energy and, and it's a conversation that politicians don't like to have, because they don't like to tell people that they've got to curb activities, or that, it's down to us as individuals. But, we have to have the regulation, we have to have the government policies, but actually as individuals, we also need to look at our the demands that we're putting on all our resources, because that's the only way we're going to balance it out, I think.
Yeah, and I mean it's not about making drastic changes to the way we live our lives. It's just making that little bit of extra effort in turning the tap off and loading your dishwasher and only running it when it's full, that sort of thing. A lot of just sort of sensible stuff, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's just having that awareness, I think, as you're going about your everyday life, isn't it? And just thinking, actually, do I need this, that and the other?
Yeah, absolutely.
This podcast is brought to you by CCW, the voice for water consumers. And one of the common riposts we have when we're trying to get people to change their behaviours is leaks and leakage. This is, people are saying, well, why do I need to turn the tap off if, the tap outside on the road is never turned off, it's just a constant leak? And one of the things I was interested in terms of your work at the Rivers Trust, you work with leaky dams, is that right? Fixing leaky dams. Can you just speak a little bit about that? Because I think most people don't think of dams leaking as something along with pipes and the rest,
Yeah, so leaky dams are a very specific kind of thing. And we spend a lot of time putting in leaky dams in rivers. And the idea is that they tend to sit slightly above the height of low flow river. So when the river is flowing, but it's quite low, it will just sneak under the dam. And then the leaky dam it's often a felled tree or branches of, trees and tree trunks, small tree trunks, and they don't fit together really perfectly. So then when the flow goes up, when there's a high rainfall event, the water level will rise, but the dam will allow some water through, but it will hold up the water so that it's just a slower flow coming downstream, so you don't get this big plug of water. And that's all part of where I was talking before about slowing the flow of water and holding it in the catchment for just a bit longer. And so you often get small amounts of flooding upstream of these leaky dams, but they won't cause massive flooding. And, you would only ever put them in place in sort of, fields and, valley areas where there's not housing and things. So, they just hold up the water a bit. So they're kind of, incomplete dams created by fallen trees and branches and things that just help to slow down the flow of the water a bit.
That's really interesting. And the way you've described, some of the other things that can happen that you sort of what I suppose people describe as more nature-based solutions. What do you think needs to happen to see more of those sorts of options being explored?
Well, I think there are quite a few reasons why they're not used as extensively as they could be. And it takes a little bit of a change in attitude, probably by government and the regulators, because it's very simple to just pour concrete into an area and know exactly what the outcome from that will be. For nature-based solutions, it's a little less certain, maybe. It's a little harder to fully predict exactly what the outcome will be. But we're just kicking off a big project at the moment, which is called Mainstreaming Nature-Based Solutions. And it's a project that's funded by Ofwat Innovation Fund. But it's the purpose behind it is that we will look at nature-based solutions and try and work out how we can provide the evidence and what changes are required for regulation and what the current barriers are to making them a bit more widespread and the first port of call, essentially, for water companies and others who are investing in solutions for the environment. And a big sort of focus of it is that every 5 years, the water companies go through a spending review, and they develop their national environment programme, where they spend money to deliver environmental improvements. Now, historically, a lot of that investment has gone into quite what we call grey infrastructure projects. So a lot of concrete, chemicals, solutions to improving discharges from sewage treatment works or whatever it might be. And this project is looking at how the same, if not better, improvements can be delivered across catchments using nature-based solutions that are funded from the water company pot. And the hope is that by next WINEPS, in the next price review, which will be in 2029, all the evidence and regulatory barriers will be removed so that nature-based solutions can be that first choice solution wherever it's feasible. So, hopefully, and I think there is a bit of a change in mentality in regulators at the moment, even already. People are beginning to see that actually there are many wider benefits. So you might get the same outcome from the one challenge that you're trying to achieve, maybe a discharge from a treatment works or something. But actually, if you use nature-based solutions, there are many additional benefits. So you get additional benefits from improving biodiversity, reducing flood risk, reducing drought risk, all the things that we've been talking about. They're additional benefits from using nature-based solutions, as well as improving the water quality from a discharge or reducing nutrient levels across the catchment. So
yeah, that's got to be the way to go, hasn't it?
I think so. Yeah. It seems like a complete obvious thing to do, really.
And something else I wanted to touch on, Tessa, just looking at the Rivers Trust website. This episode is going to come out. Unfortunately, the big river watch may have concluded by that time. But this seems like a really innovative initiative in terms of building a picture of river health across the country. Can you just explain briefly what that is, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So Big River Watch is our campaign to try and get everyone out on rivers, getting to know their river a little bit better. So it's an app. It's a free app that you can download from Google Play or the App Store. And essentially, it takes you through a survey. So you just need to download the free app, get to your river, have a look at what you can see. And then the survey takes you through some observations. So things like how fast the water's flowing, what colour the water is, any wildlife you can see, any plants, whether you can see any signs of pollution, litter, all these kinds of things. But also how it makes you feel. We're quite interested in the connection that people have to their river, and actually how that makes you feel. And actually, does an obviously damaged, polluted river actually make you feel differently from a healthy river? Does that impact on how you perceive it and how you feel when you're there? So yeah, I mean, we've kicked it off this weekend around World Water Day, but it's going to be open year round, so actually anyone can do it anytime. We'll be doing particular trawls of the data around key moments in the year. We'll do a big push every spring and every autumn because they're quite good times of year to look at what's going on in rivers, and so we'll publish the outputs from that each spring and autumn. So hopefully in the next couple of weeks we'll get the first output from the first survey that we did. Early indications are that we've got good coverage nationally, and lots of responses, so it's looking good so far. And we'll be able to glean some information, and it's quite a high level overview of health across the country. But what we'll be able to do is pair that with other information that we get from more detailed water quality sampling and macroinvertebrate sampling, for example. So we'll be able to build up a bigger picture of river health across the country. We also hope that it will be a way of, by encouraging people to get out and look at their river, will increase people's knowledge and understanding of what it is they're seeing, what a healthy river looks like. But also maybe they'll get inspired to find out a bit more and actually get involved in some more citizen science, some more in-depth studies that we and other organisations carry out on sort of water testing and things. So that we'll just increase our understanding about what's happening in our rivers so much more.
Well, that sounds brilliant. Tessa, we always try to remember to ask our guests what their personal water use is, and importantly, whether they actually know what it is. And you'd be surprised at how many people have absolutely got no idea whatsoever. So do you happen to know how much water you use every day?
Well, I'm ashamed to say that no, I don't. Part of the reason for that, I have a slight excuse. I did try to find out at one point, and we don't have water metering here at the moment, but I live in a house with 5 other people, and bizarrely we have a missed connection with our next door neighbour. So they used to, apparently, long time historically, there used to be 3 houses. Now there's only 2. And we actually have a spur off our water supply that goes to supply part of our neighbour's property. So our water consumption is not just ours, it's theirs, half of theirs as well as ours, kind of thing.
Oh, right.
So it's actually, so there's a kind of slightly bizarre system going on. So I'm ashamed to say I don't know what my water consumption is, but we do make an effort to try and be sort of fairly water wise. We use water butts and we don't water the garden from a tap, and likewise for washing the car, and we reuse water in the house for watering plants and things like that. So, and we're very, there's never a half empty dishwasher or clothes wash that goes on. So,
well, that's all good to hear anyway.
Yes.
But you have, maybe I'll have another go at trying to work out what our water consumption is. It'd be interesting.
Well, a lot of people don't know, who, not saying the using way, who probably should. Yeah, exactly. So, but we have actually done an episode, a league table episode called the Water League, where we went through and ranked lots of our guests and their usage and stuff. And there were some very, very impressive scores on there, like, reminiscent of Denmark that you mentioned earlier, definitely in that sort of vibe. Okay, well, just before we let you go, is there anything else feel like you'd like to promote, or you feel like people should be paying attention to for the Rivers Trust?
Not particularly. We'll be bringing out our State of Our Rivers report early next year, around February time. So we produced one a couple of years ago, and it's a really good resource of information about what's happening in our rivers and the state they're in, but also the solutions that we might have. And we thought it was time for an update, so we can see how things have changed, and if there are particularly more problems that we need to be thinking about. There are sort of some emerging chemicals that we didn't know were such a problem at the last edition of the report. So, there's sort of more information that we're gathering all the time. And so that'll be coming out next year, which will hopefully be a really informative.
But perhaps if you don't mind, you could come back on and tell us all about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that'd be great. Well, Tessa Wardley, Director of Comms and Advocacy for the Rivers Trust, thank you again for coming on to Waterfall.
No problem. It's been lovely to talk to you.
What would you like Waterfall to cover next? Send your water-saving topics to podcast@ccwater.org.uk.
Wow, so a great interview there with Tessa. Really good stuff that she was bringing out there. It sounded like you did enjoy doing it, Tom. You were thriving in your natural habitat.
Well, I've learned from the best, Mike. I've been in the shadows all this time, and it was my turn in the spotlight.
But I really liked some of the things that she was saying. It was really interesting hearing about de-wiggling, which, see, in my head, de-wiggling is what I asked my kids to do when they were really young and you try to change a nappy. Stop that wiggling! Do some de-wiggling! It's got different connotations are brought to my head.
Yeah.
But fascinating how de-wiggling can actually help with drought resilience.
No, absolutely. And, there were so many things that I was learning there. Also, like the leaks as well on the dams that they were dealing with, and just the whole big river watch as well. There was a lot packed in there. And I think it's crucial as well to realise that the Rivers Trust and the Canal Rivers Trust are very different organisations.
Yeah, she'd clearly been asked that question 1,000 times.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Actually, it will be interesting to see how the big River Watch initiative turns out, in terms of the outputs from that and what learning points come out of that. So it'd be fascinating to keep a close eye on that. The other thing as well, which was one of the recurring themes that we touch on in Waterfall, is that fundamentally many people don't like being told what to do.
Yeah,
it's understandable, isn't it? It's human nature.
Naturally.
Yeah. So, but when it comes to water use, and that's another area where people are it can be perceived that they're being told what to do, but that's certainly not where we're coming from in Waterfall. We are amplifying that really important message that, do you know what, there's all this good stuff that comes from saving water, and actually do it happily, do it voluntarily, and no one's imposing restrictions on you. It's actually about doing something that's really good. So yeah, it was interesting that she brought that up.
Just what you were saying there about telling people what to do and taking heed of things. A little teaser for next week. We've got a great episode with Tony V, who is a dear listener of ours who took on board so much of our advice and really made a big change to his own water use. So definitely look out for that episode coming next week.
Wow, Tom, this is a new term for you. This is another new thing for you, because usually you are like listen to the back catalogue, check it out.
True.
And now you're plugging in future ones. But you're quite right. That's really one to tune in for. That's something special where we've got, as Tom said, one of our listeners who has adopted so many tips. And it is properly heartwarming episode and packed full of insight, because he's actually based in the States, lives in the United States, so brings a completely different perspective to the table. So one to look out for. Tom, I think we've pretty much ran out of time here. So just before we go, do you want to remind our listeners how they can get in touch?
Yeah, it's podcast@ccwater.org.uk. You can email us there. Tony V emailed us there and then he got on the show. So, maybe that can be an avenue. We're on Instagram. We're on Twitter. Go on iTunes. Please leave us a 5-star review as well. Check out all the back catalogue. I think there's something like 24 hours of waterfall out there. So you could fill an entire day with non-stop Mike and Karen and the occasional Kath cameo.
Wow, that's like the best day of my life.
So there's many ways that you can do that. And, we're now in the full swing of season 3. So if you've not caught up on, our live edition that we've done and the episode with Leaky Lose, and, we're just really smashing out the hits at the moment. The podcast's on a bit of a roll, and get involved.
There we are. So that's the end of today's episode, the one where Tom fills the power vacuum. So thank you for listening. It's goodbye from me, Mike.
And it's goodbye from me, your new host, Tom.
Please, no.